This video is over functions, specifically equations. When you're dealing with a function equation, typically you're dealing with the equation y equals mx plus b. This equation is referred to as slope-intercept form because it's made up of the pieces called slope and intercept. And we're going to talk about those vocabulary terms. Now, y and x in the equation are always going to be the variables. M and b are going to be substituted with numbers. The letter M is known as several names. It's known as the rate of change. It's known as the slope. It's known as the constant of proportionality. The one you may be familiar with is the unit rate. It's also called a coefficient. All of these terms mean the same thing, and so it's important that you can recognize any of these terms are referring to the letter M. Now, what do these terms mean? These terms are referring to how M is how much the data, we're talking about data now, how much the data changes by. So we're talking about data that's changing, and M is the value, the number of how much it changes by. It's important to remember that the rate of change, the slope, the constant of proportionality, M, is always a fraction. Now remember, it's always a simplified fraction. The fraction is a change in y over the change in x. That's what that little triangle symbol means. Change in y over the change in x. And we're going to talk about how to use all of these terms in order to find M. The other piece of the equation, y equals mx plus b, is the b value. So in slope-intercept form, just like I mentioned before, y and x are always going to be the variables. M was what we just went over, rate of change, slope, how much the data is changing by. B also has several values. B is called the initial value. It is also called the y-intercept. It can also be called the constant. Now, what does that mean? So again, when we're referring to data, we are referring to where the data starts. So at what number does the data start at? And your clue is to always look for 0. Always look for 0 to help you find the starting point. Now, we're going to do several examples together. I'm going to give you an equation, and we're going to pull out the M and the B values. So in number 1, I give you the equation y equals 3x plus 5. Now remember, our general equation is y equals mx plus b, and it'll always be that order. So if we want to pull out the m value, remember the m and the x are always side by side. The 3 and the x are side by side. So m is going to be 3. Don't put 3x, just put the value, 3. B is the number at the end, the plus b value that's by itself. In this case, the plus 5. 5 is our b value. M is our slope. B is our y-intercept. For number 2, we have the equation y equals negative 2x plus 6. Remember our general equation, y equals mx plus b. If we want to pull out the m value, the m and the x are always side by side. So in this case, it's going to be a negative 2x. Don't put the x value. The rate of change is only negative 2. The b value is the number that's off by itself, the plus b. In this case, we have a plus 6. So our b value is going to be 6. M is our rate of change. 6 is our initial value. For number 3, we have the equation y equals 1/2 x plus 10. Remember the general form of slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. The m value is always side by side with x. So in our equation, 1/2 x, 1/2 is our coefficient. The b value is what's left over at the end by itself. In this case, it's a plus 10. So 10 is our constant. Notice how I'm using all the different names that we listed earlier. We need to be familiar with all terms. For number 4, we have the equation y equals 8x minus 6. Remember our general form for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. The m value is always connected to the x variable. The mx goes together. So in our equation, the 8x is together. So 8 is our rate of change. The b value is what's left alone, the plus b at the end. In this case, it's a minus 6. So we take the minus sign as a negative. Instead of plus b, we have a negative 6. Negative 6 is our initial value. For number 5, we have the equation y equals x minus 5. Remember the general equation for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Starting with the m value, the m and the x are always side by side. So in our equation, there is no number with x. When you have no value in front of x, it's an understood 1. 1 is our slope. B, which is the plus b at the end of the equation, is represented by the minus 5. We treat the minus as a negative sign, and so our y-intercept is negative 5. For number 6, we have the equation y equals 5x. Remember, the general equation for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. M is always side by side with our x value. The m and the x are together. In this case, we have 5x together. So 5 is our coefficient. For our b value, the b value is the plus b that's at the end. Well, we don't have anything at the end of this problem. So our b value is simply 0. And that's our constant. If there's nothing there, it could be a 0. For number 7, we have the equation y equals 12. Remember, the general equation for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. For our m value, m and x are always side by side. Well, you'll notice there is no m and x in this equation, meaning our m value is 0. The rate of change is 0. If there's no x, there's no m. The b value is what's left over at the end by itself, the plus b. In this case, all we have in this equation is 12. So our initial value would be 12. For problem number 8, we have the equation x equals 6. Notice how this equation is completely different to the original form I've shown you, y equals mx plus b. Because this is completely different, we have very different terms for our slope and our y-intercept. M, the slope, the rate of change, is known as the word undefined. Because the equation is x equals instead of y equals, we have an undefined slope. We can also say that there is no y-intercept. There's no plus b. Again, these values can't be found because the equation is x equals instead of y equals. Instead, the only information that we can give is that the x-intercept is 6. It will only be these types of equations, x equals and a number, that we have this type of answer, an undefined slope, no y-intercept, and an x-intercept of whatever this value is. For the next part of this video, we're going to be taking equations and we're going to be rewriting them into slope-intercept form. As a reminder, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. When we are rewriting equations into slope-intercept form, we need to remember that the y variable needs to be by itself. The mx value goes second, and the b value goes last. Now, we're not solving any equations, we're simply taking the pieces and moving them around. So that way they can end up in the slope-intercept form equation, y equals mx plus b. For example number 1, we have the equation 3x plus the y equals 2. So when we have our problem, I think it's easiest if we split the problem in half, down the equal sign. And we can do the same thing with our general equation, y equals mx plus b. If I split that down the equal sign, you can see what's not lining up in the correct position. You can see that the y value is right next to the equal sign. That's good. But you can also see that the 3x is way out here in front. It's not there in the middle. So we want to take the 3x and we want to move it to where it needs to go. We want to move the 3x in between in the middle section of the equation. Now, when you move something and you see how this blue line I've drawn to show where we're putting it has crossed the red line I drew through the equal sign, that means that we have to change the problem. Instead of a 3x, we do the opposite. It's a minus 3x. So if we move that piece, remember the y value is going to stay. We don't touch that. We've taken the 3x. It's now a minus 3x. And we still have our positive 2 there at the back. This equation is now in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. For number 2, we have the equation 2y minus 4x equals 6. Again, I'm going to start by drawing my line down my equal sign. so I can see what is not in the right spot. The general equation for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Again, we want the y on the left-hand side, the mx in the middle, and the plus b at the end. So we're going to start by taking the minus 4x, and we're going to move it to the other side. Because again, the mx needs to go on the right-hand side. Still in the middle, but on the right-hand side. When we move something across the red line, we do the opposite. So instead of a minus 4x, we're going to do a plus 4x. And let's rewrite what we have. We have the 2y, because we haven't used that piece yet. We now have a positive 4x, and we have a positive 6. However, this equation is still not in slope-intercept form. You should notice in the general form, there is no number with the y. The y needs to be completely by itself. Our equation is 2y. The 2 and the y side by side mean multiply. So when we move the 2, we do the opposite. We divide by 2. When we divide by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now our equation is in y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form. For number 3, we have the equation 2y minus 3x equals 10. I start by drawing my line down my equal sign. We can then compare that to the general form, y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept form. Again, drawing my line down the equal sign so I can compare the two. I'm going to start by moving the minus 3x because that needs to go on the right-hand side in the middle. So I take that minus 3x, we move it to the other side, and when we move it, we do the opposite. So instead of minus 3x, we do a plus 3x. Now let's rewrite what we have. We still have the 2y because we did not use that piece yet. We now have a positive 3x on the other side, and we also have a positive 10. However, this equation is not finished because in slope-intercept form, the y value is by itself. There should be no other numbers, meaning we need to take the 2 and move it to the other side. Now the 2 and the y side by side means multiply. So when we move it, we do the opposite, we divide. Now we cannot do 3 divided by 2, not and get a whole number. When you get to a problem that you can't divide evenly, leave it as a fraction. Remember, slope or rate of change is always a fraction. As long as it's simplified, and 3 over 2 is, you can leave it as the fraction 3 over 2x. The 10 divided by 2 you can solve and get 5. Our equation is now y equals 3 over 2x plus 5. For number 4, we have the problem 3y minus 9x equals 18. I start by drawing my line down my equal sign so that way I can compare my two pieces. Remember, the general equation is y equals mx plus b, and that's slope-intercept form. Again, drawing my line down my equal sign so we can compare the two sides. We start by moving the minus 9x because the mx needs to be in the middle on the right-hand side. When we move a minus 9x, we do the opposite. We do a positive 9x. Now let's rewrite what we have. We still have the 3y because that part did not get used yet. We changed it to a positive 9x and a positive 18. In slope-intercept form, the y value is completely by itself. There is no other number. So we need to move the 3 to the other side as well. The 3 and the y side by side mean multiply. So we do the opposite, we divide. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Y equals 3x plus 6 is our new equation. For our last problem, we're going to do the equation 2y plus 6 equals 5x. Again, drawing our line down the equal sign so we can compare the two sides. Remember, slope-intercept form is known as y equals mx plus b. Again, drawing the line down the equal sign so we can compare the two sides. Now, this equation is different. The 5x is already on the right-hand side, so it's already in the correct spot. Instead, we need to move the plus 6 because the plus b needs to be here on the right-hand side all the way at the back. So when we move the plus 6, we do the opposite. We do a minus 6. Now let's rewrite what we have. We still have the 2y because we haven't solved that part yet. The 5x can stay where it is because it's already good to go. And we've changed this plus 6 to a minus 6 so we can write it in slope-intercept form. Now, we're still not done because the y value cannot have any number with it. Y is completely by itself. So that means that we need to get rid of the 2. The 2 and the y side by side mean multiply, so we do the opposite, we divide. Now, we cannot do 5 divided by 2 evenly. So, because we can't do it evenly, we can leave it as a fraction, 5 over 2. It's okay to leave it as a fraction because remember, slope or rate of change is always a fraction. Just make sure it's a simplified fraction, and 5 over 2 is. We can do the 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And so our final equation is y equals 5 over 2x minus 3.